Yeah.
Alright, the hinge theorem is very, very closely related to what we've been talking about. Okay, the hinge theorem just says if I've got two different triangles, and I know that I've got two sides, or two pairs of sides congruent. Okay, so these two triangles, I've got RS and AB congruent, and then I've got ST and BC congruent. So two sides are the same in each of these triangles. Well then, if I look at the angles in between those two congruent sides, that's not the same, right? So whichever angle is bigger, the side opposite that is bigger, right? So in this example, we're just saying that side RT is bigger than side AC because the angle in between the two sides here is larger than the angle here. Okay, that's all the hinge theorem is saying. And the idea is kind of what we've been talking about, right? If you take your hands and create an angle, the wider pull your hands apart, right? The bigger that angle is, the further your fingertips are apart. Right? If you've got a real small angle, your fingertips are close together. The bigger you make that angle, the wider, or the greater distance between your fingertips. Okay? Or you can think about it as a door. Okay? That's kind of where the idea of hinge theorem comes from. If you think about a door just opened a tiny little bit, okay? That angle is really small. The distance between the door and the frame is really small. The more you open the door, the bigger the angle is, the greater the distance between the door and the frame. That's where the hinge idea comes from. Okay? You can think about it with your hands as well. Same idea. The converse of the hinge theorem is very similar. It's still saying, well, I've got two sides the same in these two triangles, but this time I'm given the third side. Well, if this third side is bigger, that means that this angle is bigger. Okay, so that's all we're doing here on the front of this is just comparing sides and angles. Okay, so if we look at our examples down here, okay, the first example just says compare the measures of GF and FE. Okay, so GF and FE are these two sides right here. So if I look at these figures, I know that this angle here is larger than this angle here, the angle that's opposite GF. The angle that's opposite GF is larger than the angle that's opposite FE. Therefore, the actual length of GF is larger than FE. So all we're going to do is write an inequality and say, well, GF is greater than FE. Okay? Because the angle that's opposite GF is larger, the length of GF is also larger. Similar idea if we're comparing angles. Okay, so here it says compare the measure of angle ABD, so this angle right here, with the measure of CBD, this angle up here. Well, to do that, I'm looking at the sides that are opposite those angles. So here, I can say that this angle is larger. Okay, angle ABD is larger because the side opposite is larger. So we can say the measure of angle ABD is greater M stands for measure. So we're saying the measure of angle ABD is greater than the measure of angle CBD. Okay, so that's all we're doing here. We're just comparing the measures. We're not solving for anything. We're not finding actual measures. We're just saying, well, since this angle is bigger, that side's bigger. Since that side's bigger, that angle's bigger. That's all we're doing here at first. Okay. Questions? Okay, so let's go ahead and try a couple of these then. So these first 4 here on this side are all dealing with that idea. Okay, so take a look at what comparisons you're asked to make. Okay, whether you're comparing 2 sides or 2 angles, and just figure out which one's bigger. Okay, so let's take a couple of minutes. You guys try these ones here.
Same. Huh? 200. Yeah. What? Hey, mate. You ever had jazz egg? Have you ever had jazz egg? Yeah. Sounds good.
It's too fast. Never mind. I was too. I see what that's good. Because this was setting up like I was measuring the angle.
Oh, yeah.
I did this for these 2. I flip flopped. I'm glad it comes up.
Yep.
Really heavy on that. Wait.
Again.
Alright, did we get these comparisons? Okay, now notice that writing it like this, MR is greater than RP, would be the same thing as saying RP is less than MR. You can have it written either way. Okay, either way is perfectly fine. Right? You don't have to have greater than symbol. You could have it MR is greater than RP, or RP is less than MR. That could be the case for all four of these. Okay. Any questions on making these comparisons? Across. Yeah. Yep. So for this one, yep. Just looking at the so if we're comparing angle C and angle Z, we're just looking at the sides across from angle C and angle Z. Yes. Yeah. If you're comparing angles like Y and B, you would look at XC and AC. Yep. Any other questions on the front here? All right, let's flip over to the back then. So 5 and 6 are pretty similar here, except we've got X's in there now. So we still want to use this same logic. Okay, so we're saying we've got two sides the same, but then I've got angles that are different here. Okay, so I'm going to end up comparing this 4x minus 10 and this 40. So what I'm looking at is these two angles. Well, 120 is obviously larger than 115. So that tells me that this side, 4x minus 10, is bigger than this side, 40. So I'm going to do the same thing that we were doing. I'm going to say this side is greater than this side. But I have an expression for that. So I'm going to say 4x minus 10 is bigger than 40. Okay, this side is bigger than this side. Okay. So now, I just want to solve this inequality. I want to get x by itself. To do that, we do the same things that we do for an equation. Yeah, so we're going to start by adding 10. So we have 4x is greater than 50. Divide by 4. And that gets us 12.5. Okay, and decimals are always fair game. Okay, so that's a perfectly acceptable answer. And so any value of x that's bigger than 12.5 here would suffice. All right, now, technically, yeah, that's a good point. I should point that out as well. So when we're talking about inequalities, there is one difference between solving an inequality and an equation, right? And that's if we divide by a negative value, we have to flip the inequality sign, right? So you may want to make a little note of that. And I know you guys have worked with that in algebra before. So if we divide by a negative, flip the inequality. Okay, so here, for example, if I would have divided both sides by -4, my answer would end up being x is less than negative 12.5, right, if I would have divided by -4. So we would just flip the inequality sign, right? That's what it means to flip it, is just turn it around. Right? So if it was greater than, it would become less than. Right? We didn't do that in this case, right? We divided by a positive. But if that ever comes up, okay, if you end up dividing by a negative number, you flip the inequality. Right? So we want to do something very similar here for number 6. Okay, this time though we're looking at the angles, but we're still going to set up an inequality here. So let's see if you guys can take a second and try number 6 here. Set up an inequality. Get x by itself.
I got 12x.
So x is greater than 12 or less than 12?
You can elaborate. No.
This is confusing. I'm gonna.
So,
I want to say Team B went farther.
oh, you're looking at 7 already?
Yeah. Or no? Oh, I didn't even see 6. My bad.
Yeah,
My bad.
we're gonna do 7 together because 7 is kind of good.
Yeah, I did. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to try 6 here.
Hey, would it be 3x minus 3? Do I use the 60 on the outside or the 33 right there?
The 33 is the angle.
So, do I make it like bigger?
So to figure that out, we want to look at the two sides that are opposite those two angles. So the side opposite the 3x minus 3 is 30. The side opposite the 33 is 36.
So it'd be
Right, yeah.
He definitely said no.
Hmm? It's not okay. It's 36 divided by 3.
So for this one, did we get x is less than 12?
Yes.
Okay, our setup, we're looking at these two angles. The 3x minus 3 is opposite a side of length 30, and the 33 degree angle is opposite a side of length 36. So that tells me that this angle is smaller than this angle. So my inequality would just be 3x minus 3 is less than 33. Okay? Questions on those ones?
All right, then let's take a look at the story problem down here. Okay, so
On a story problem, we don't have a picture, we want to draw a picture. So there's kind of a lot going on here. So let's sketch each piece one at a time here. So it says 2 paintball teams leave from the same base camp. Team A goes 7.5 miles west. Okay, so since we're talking about directions, I'm going to put this on a coordinate plane. Okay. Which direction is west? Left, right? So Team A goes 7.5 miles west. So let's say right here is 7.5 miles. And then turns 35 degrees north of west. Okay? So north is up, right? If we're looking at a map, so it's saying they're going west, and then they turn 35 degrees north of west. Okay, so this wording can be a little bit confusing. Okay, when it says 35 degrees north of west. What that's saying is from due west, they turn 35 degrees. So what that means is this angle out here is 35 degrees. Okay, it's not the angle on the inside, because this angle would obviously be an obtuse angle. Okay? This angle out here is 35 degrees, and then they travel another 5 miles. Okay, so then this is where Team A ends up. Team B does something similar, except they go due east. Okay, so due east would be this direction. So Team B ends up going 7.5 miles this direction. And then it says they turn 40 degrees north of east. Okay, so again, that means they're turning 40 degrees this way. So this is the 40-degree angle out here. Okay, again, they travel 5 miles and end up right here. So this is Team B. So, at this point, which team is further base camp? Okay, so what the tricky thing about this is these two angles aren't the angles that we need. Okay? If we're thinking about these two triangles and I want to compare these two side lengths, I need these angles on the inside of the triangle. So if this angle is 35 degrees, this angle would be 145, right? Because these two angles would make a linear pair. So 180 minus 35 gets me this is 145. Same logic for this one. So what would this one get? 140. So using this hinge theorem idea, which of these distances, or which of these sides of the triangle is greater? The one for Team A or the one for Team B? I think I heard, some rumblings of Team A, right? Since this angle is bigger, this distance is bigger. Okay, so the answer, which team is further from the base camp, is Team A. Okay, so the wording may have been a little bit tricky on this problem, but are we okay with how we set up that picture? Through those two triangles? Okay. Any questions?